The most devastating and transformative truth a man can encounter in his relationships with women is also the most simple. Respect is not a part of the foundation. It is the entire bedrock upon which everything else is built. A woman's love, her loyalty, and her genuine desire are not free-floating emotions that exist independently. They are deeply intertwined with, and utterly dependent upon, her fundamental admiration for you as a man. This is not a cynical calculation, but an instinctual pull. When she looks at you, she needs to feel that she is in the presence of someone whose internal compass is unwavering, whose decisions carry a natural weight, and whose personal boundaries are firm enough to make her feel both challenged and safe. This respect is earned not through grand declarations or lavish gifts, but through the quiet, consistent demonstration of your character in everyday life. It manifests in the way you carry yourself, the purpose that drives you forward, and the unshakable frame you maintain when faced with pressure. It's the subtle understanding that your world does not orbit around her, but rather she is invited to join a world that is already rich and compelling. The moment this perception shifts, the moment she senses you are bending your principles to appease her, pleading for her attention instead of commanding it, or chasing her validation as if it were the source of your own self-worth, is the moment the first crack appears in the foundation. She may not be able to articulate this shift consciously at first. It often begins as a vague feeling, a slight but persistent irritation where there was once attraction, a sense of restlessness where there was once comfort. The specific things you do for her begin to feel less like gifts from a position of strength and more like bids for approval from a place of need. This erosion is insidious, because it attacks the very source of her attraction. She was drawn to the strength and stability you represented. When those qualities seem to fade, replaced by acquiescence and neediness, her instinctual pull toward you weakens. Without the solid ground of respect, the entire structure of the relationship becomes precarious. The love she expresses may begin to feel conditional, her loyalty may become situational, and her desire can flicker and die. She doesn't decide this intellectually. She feels it viscerally. The man she once admired seems to have vanished, and in his place is someone she feels she can or even must push around. And in that realization, she doesn't just lose respect for you. She begins to lose respect for herself for being with a man who no longer embodies the strength she craves. This is the silent, devastating collapse that begins long before the first argument about distance or the first admission that she is not happy. It is the hollowing out of the relationship from the inside, all starting with the disintegration of that non-negotiable foundation. The collapse of respect is rarely a dramatic, single event. It is not typically shattered by one large betrayal or failure, but is instead eroded gradually, like a river stone worn smooth by the constant, gentle flow of water. This erosion happens imperceptibly, through a series of small, daily compromises that seem harmless in the moment, even noble. It begins when you tolerate a tone of voice or a dismissive comment that you would never accept from a friend or colleague, rationalizing it as keeping the peace. It continues when you start over-explaining your decisions, your whereabouts, or your intentions, not for clarity's sake, but in the desperate hope of gaining her approval and avoiding her disapproval. You might find yourself rearranging your schedule, abandoning your hobbies, or softening your opinions to better align with her moods, mistakenly believing that this flexibility is the hallmark of a supportive partner. Each of these small concessions is a silent auction of your own dignity. Every time you abandon a personal standard or suppress a boundary to avoid conflict, you are communicating a devastating message that holding on to her is more important than holding on to yourself. She doesn't register this consciously as a list of transgressions. She feels it as a slow-dawning disappointment. The man she believed was her anchor, her rock in a chaotic world, begins to feel more like a reed, bending in whichever direction her emotional winds blow. This is when the testing begins in earnest. These tests are not usually premeditated acts of cruelty. They are instinctual probes, a deep-seated survival mechanism wired into her to ascertain the strength of the man she is with. She needs to know, on a primal level, if you are strong enough to lead, to hold your frame steady when she, or life pushes back. She is unconsciously checking to see if the foundation is still solid. When you consistently fail these tests, when you meet her emotional storms with pleading, resistance with bargaining, and her disrespect with apologetic compliance, you confirm her deepest, most frightening suspicion. The stability she thought she had was an illusion. The protector she relied upon cannot even protect his own self-respect. This realization hurts her profoundly. It is not the anger one feels toward a villain, but the profound disappointment of discovering that your sanctuary is made of cardboard. Your weakness does not make her feel powerful. It makes her feel unsafe and alone. Your attempts to win her back through increased devotion and overcompensation, showering her with attention, gifts, and promises, only dig the grave deeper. In your mind, you are proving your love. In her eyes, you are proving your desperation. Confirming that you value her opinion more than your own, and in that final surrender, you extinguish the last flickering spark of her admiration. When the foundation of respect has fully crumbled, a hollowing out process begins, transforming the relationship into a ghost of its former self. This is not a stage of loud arguments or dramatic confrontations. It is a quiet, chilling withdrawal. Her behavior shifts in predictable, painful patterns. She creates emotional and physical distance, framing it with plausible excuses. She's busy, she's tired, she needs space. Intimacy becomes a forced ritual, feeling unnatural and draining because genuine closeness with a man she cannot admire is psychologically incongruent. Her language changes. Her tone may carry a subtle layer of contempt seen in dismissive glances, sarcastic remarks, or open criticism of small things you do. She might start comparing you to other men, not because she desires them, but because they unconsciously represent the strength and autonomy you have seemingly surrendered. This stage is profoundly painful for her, not because she is intentionally cruel, but because she is in a state of active mourning. She is grieving the man she thought you were, and, just as importantly, the version of herself that felt safe, proud, and feminine by your side. The man who once commanded her admiration has vanished, and in his place is a stranger whose presence serves as a constant reminder of that loss. She may remain in the relationship for reasons of comfort, convenience, or fear of the unknown. But every day spent with a man she cannot look up to is an act of quiet self-betrayal that chips away at her own self-respect. She is trapped in a paradox, feeling simultaneously superior to you for your perceived weakness and deeply ashamed of herself for staying with it. This internal conflict breeds a deep-seated resentment and a restless emptiness that no amount of external effort from you can fill. You could buy her gifts, plan elaborate dates, or shower her with affection. But all of it registers as meaningless noise because it does not address the core void, the absence of admiration. The relationship may maintain the outward appearance of stability, shared living spaces, social obligations, routine interactions, but internally, she is already checked out. She feels a disconnection that haunts her, forcing her to confront a truth she may be unwilling to voice aloud, that respect is the only soil in which her love can grow, and without it, everything feels hollow. Her coldness or bitterness is not just a reaction to you. It is the external manifestation of her own disappointment and the grim realization that she is an accomplice in her own unhappiness, staying in a dynamic that erodes the very person she wants to be. When a man feels the chilling winds of her withdrawal and the ground of her respect giving way, his most natural yet self-destructive instinct is to try harder. He misinterprets the problem as a deficit of affection or proof of devotion. This is the fatal mistake. He begins to pour more energy into the relationship, or affection, more attention, more gifts, more explanations for his behavior, and more apologies for crimes he didn't know he committed. He believes he is demonstrating his love and commitment, but from her perspective, he is only proving his desperation. This overcompensation is the final confirmation of her deepest suspicion, that he values her more than he values himself. The very act of overgiving when respect is lost only pushes her further away, as it highlights the very lack of self-worth that caused the erosion in the first place, the only path that leads away from this spiral. Whether toward reclaiming your power or potentially reigniting a spark of her respect, is the most counterintuitive. You must stop. This means ceasing all efforts to convince, chase, or plead. It involves a conscious and deliberate withdrawal of your energy from the futile task of managing her emotions and a redirection of that focus inward. This is not a manipulative tactic of playing hard to get, but a genuine recalibration of your priorities. It is the practice of enforcing boundaries with calm consistency, not with dramatic ultimatums. It is choosing silence over exhausting explanations and dignified distance over begging for proximity. It is the ultimate demonstration that your sense of worth is not negotiable and that you are a complete entity unto yourself. With or without her validation, this shift, when executed from a place of genuine self-respect and not bitter retaliation, is psychologically devastating to her. Your silence becomes louder than 1,000 apologies. Your calm indifference is more powerful than any argument. Your refusal to crumble or engage in emotional games shatters her illusion of control over your emotional state. Suddenly, the dynamic is inverted. She is no longer the withdrawer who holds the power, but is instead faced with a man who has become emotionally self-sufficient. This forces her to sit with the full weight of her own actions and choices without the familiar dynamic of your reactive energy to push against. The pain she feels in this moment is not from the loss of your affection, but from the stark realization that her methods no longer work. It reminds her vividly of the man she first met, the whole, grounded, and purpose-driven individual she was initially drawn to. The man who, in his quiet reclamation of self, has become untouchable to her games, exposing the painful truth that the respect she once had was something she herself dismantled, and that it may now be permanently beyond her reach. The man who truly masters the principle of self-respect undergoes a transformation that transcends his romantic life. He becomes untouchable in spirit, building an identity that is no longer dependent on external validation. This is not a callous or unfeeling state, but one of profound inner stability. He understands in his bones that his mission, his growth, and his personal boundaries are non-negotiable pillars of his existence. He does not view a woman's presence as the ultimate validation of his worth, nor does he interpret her absence as a definitive proof of his failure. His value is an internal calculation, a quiet knowing that is not up for debate. This unwavering consistency, this refusal to be swayed from his core path, creates a magnetic and unforgettable presence. It is a quiet confidence that communicates more than any boast or promise ever could. He walks through the world, not with arrogance, but with the unshakable certainty of a man who knows who he is and what he stands for. And that is a force that leaves a permanent mark on those who encounter it. For the woman who let that man go, the deepest and most enduring pain does not arrive in the immediate aftermath of the separation. It is not the sharp sting of a fresh breakup, with its tears and dramatic goodbyes. That initial pain is often rooted in ego, in the disruption of routine, in the fear of being alone. The true, lingering regret, the unforgettable scar manifests later, in the quiet stillness when the dust has settled. It is the pain of realizing she did not just lose a partner. She lost the opportunity to be with a man she could genuinely, unreservedly admire. She will find herself in unguarded moments, remembering the version of you that stood firm, the man who held his frame under pressure, the one who looked at her with love, but also with the quiet strength that said his world would continue to turn, with or without her. This memory becomes a haunting echo, a ghost of a possibility that she herself extinguished. The scar is so deep because it is rooted in a profound and unsettling comparison. In the aftermath, she will inevitably encounter other men. Some will worship her, placing her on a pedestal and orbiting their lives around her whims. Others may resent her or try to control her, but she will struggle, often fruitlessly, to find one who possesses that rare and potent quality of grounded self-respect. The men who chase her will highlight the absence of the man who didn't need to. The men who are icily manipulated will remind her of the one who could not be moved. The memory of your calm authority, your refusal to be diminished, And your ultimate choice to walk away with your dignity intact becomes a benchmark against which all others are measured, and they will almost always be found wanting. She is not pining for your affection. She is haunted by the loss of a feeling, the feeling of being with a man who made her feel safe. Not because he obeyed her, but because he commanded reality. The ultimate, unspoken lesson that every man must integrate is that his greatest duty is not to make a woman happy. Happiness is a fleeting, circumstantial emotion, dependent on 1,000 external variables. His greatest duty is to command respect, first and foremost from himself. This is the bedrock upon which a truly fulfilling partnership can be built. But it is also the anchor that holds him steady when the storms of life and love inevitably arrive. When a man lives by this code, he builds a foundation that no emotional tempest can erode. He becomes a man who cannot be broken because his core sense of value was never for sale. He understands that his worth is not a commodity to be negotiated in the marketplace of a relationship, but a sovereign truth to be upheld. This final realization is what separates a transient heartbreak from a permanent lesson. The man who emerges from the crucible of a broken relationship with his self-respect, not only intact but fortified, is the man who has truly won. He has won his own freedom. He has won his own peace. And in doing so, he becomes a figure of immense quiet power. The woman may move on. She may build a new life. She may even pretend to a happiness she does not fully feel. But the memory of the man who lived with unwavering self-respect, the man who looked into the abyss of rejection and chose himself, will always linger in the quiet corners of her mind. It is a ghost that does not torment with malice, but with the sobering truth of what was lost through disregard. What hurts her most in the end is not that you walked away, not that you went silent, but that she was finally forced to see you for what you had become, a man who could not be broken, because his respect was never and would never be for sale. And that realization that she had a hand in destroying the very thing she craved most is the echo that will remain long after the sound of your footsteps has faded.